Kia ora everyone. So some days the best trade is no trade at all, and today was one of those days. I watched a few stocks today, TDTH, VVPR and DRMA, but I just didn't get a clean entry, and I don't want to force a trade either, so I stayed patient. There were some big moves in the market today, but they didn't fit my criteria, and they didn't fit my strategy, and discipline is key. So let's go over the market action today and see why I chose to sit it out. So the first stock I saw when I woke up this morning was GTech. So if I switch into here, bring up the chart for GTech. So I saw this when I first got up, and it was around here. I was so I saw it in this area here where it just broken through VWAP and was pulling back and then broke here. I didn't take the trade. I didn't take the trade of VWAP here. It was still early. It was about, what time was that? That was just before 6:45, 6:40. Yeah, so it's about 6:43 when that popped up. And it did push up to a high there, and then it pulled back. I didn't take the trade there. I just didn't. It's probably a bit early for me. And this was a continuation stock, so it didn't have a fresh catalyst. So I didn't think it would go very far either. It popped up after hours yesterday on news, and I just thought, no, there's probably traders holding this overnight looking for a push higher. So at 7 o'clock they'll probably start selling, because it really hasn't pushed that high. And 7 o'clock came along, and it had sold off prior to that, and yeah, about 7 o'clock it started selling anyway. Dropped back down to the VWAP, and then it went sideways pretty much the rest of the pre-market session. So that was in for GTech. So the next stock was TDTH. This was a little cheap actually. It started off around $1.80. So when I saw it, it was already up here at $2.37. I saw it sort of pop up to that, make that high, and then it sort of pulled back, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to take that trade. So I missed the breakout when it broke over $1.83 and pushed up to $2.37. It was on my scanner, but at that stage it was under $2, and I was like, no, nah. And then I missed that move altogether. And then it pulled back and gave it all back anyway. So yeah. So TDTH, didn't really think about taking any trades on that at all at that stage. It did come back later on here around 7:30. It pushed back up through the VWAP and pushed to retest the high again. I saw it as it was breaking VWAP here, and I thought about an entry there off of VWAP. But again, I just didn't pull the trigger on that. I just left it alone. It did push up 30 cents, and maybe that would have been a good trade there, but it just wasn't, didn't really, when that big topping candle there happened, like it pushed all the way to $2.31 and pulled all the way back, I didn't want to get in on that entry. So I sort of missed the break. I just come across to look at this chart, and it had just broken VWAP, pulled back, and then pushed and started pushing up to 230. So I sort of missed that candle, but then it pulled all the way back from 230 back down to $2.10 to 11, and I was just like, no, there's too much selling going on that. So I didn't jump back in there and left it alone. So that's sort of why I didn't trade TDTH, and then it pulled back and it was sideways for ages, and then at the open it just sold off completely. So I didn't trade anything on TDTH. And the next one that popped up was VVPR. So this one here, where did I see this one? Yeah, so it pulled up just after 7 o'clock, and this one I did think about taking an entry. So sorry, just going to reset my chart here so I can move it a bit better. Okay, so this one here, I did think about taking an entry in this candle here, around $4.80. The reason why I didn't in the end is it didn't quite meet my criteria. It was a continuation stock. It had no fresh news. So even though I thought, well, maybe it'll push to 5, I decided not to take the trade. It had popped up yesterday and put in a big move up to 550 off of news. So it had made a pretty big push yesterday, and today I just, yeah, even though it had pushed up, it just didn't have a fresh catalyst for me, and I knew it was continuation stock, and it was just a little bit outside my criteria. So it didn't have that one catalyst, that one criteria for me to take that trade. So it met all the other criteria. It was the right price. Its float was fine. It was pretty low float, and you know, it had volume. It was up over 10%. So, you know, what was it up? It was up percent-wise. Yeah, so it was up over 27%, 30%. So it met that criteria as well. Not a huge gainer, but that's okay. But without that fresh catalyst, I decided not to take that trade. So if you have a look on, actually I've got the video of it here. So I'll just play this a bit quicker. So I just switched over to it here and had brought it up. I'd seen that it hadn't had any fresh news today, but it did have news yesterday. And I could see on the daily chart here that yesterday it pushed up to 550. But yeah, I had keyed up an entry at 480, and it pushed up to 497. I thought, oh, it's going to go to 5, and it pulled back here, back down to close to 480, I think. And I was still thinking about taking entry, but then it pushed to 505, and I realized, no, I've missed that entry, and I cancelled it. So I should have really been in on that first push from 480 once it had a high of like 4, I think it was 495, 4 or something like that. Still thinking about taking that entry, but cancelled that pretty quickly. And from here, the red volume just came in. Lots of volume in this candle here, and it's going to close red. And that was another reason why I didn't enter on the pullback on this candle. Big, massive red candle in the volume here. And it pulled back to the VWAP here, and there was a dip trade there, but really I thought, no, I think the move's over now. It might bounce a bit off the VWAP, but with a lot of that selling volume coming in now, I just sat on my hands and says, no, that's it. I'm not going to take a trade on this at the moment. We'll just see what it does. And if it comes up and retests, 505, then maybe a trade at the break. break through 505 would be okay, but I'm just going to scrub forward a bit. It sort of held around, yeah, so lots of selling volume came into this and it just kept pulling back. It did hold around 550 eventually here, and sort of traded over backwards and forwards over the VWAP a couple of times. Held at 460 there, pushed back over the VWAP. So there were these little trades here that possibly could have been on to get 20 cents, 15 cents a share, but it was too risky for me, and in the end I actually came back to, this is when I came back to TDTH and saw it break the VWAP, and you can see it push all the way up to 230 there. I've missed the entry here, and then it basically gives back half that move, all the way back to 211, 210, and then pulls back even further on the candle. So, does bounce off the VWAP, but by this stage I wasn't too interested in it. I was thinking, no, I'm not going to get back in here. That topping tail was a bit too much. Too much for me there. So then not a lot happened. TDTH sort of held up a bit, and this was, who was this? This was TDTH. Yeah, and then this was WKSP. Didn't like the look at this at all, right from the start. Those big topping tails at the top there. 494 reverses back down to 420. Didn't like that. Lots of selling going on these candles here. And then even when it did push up, there's still lots of selling in these candles here to push it back down below VWAP. So this one was, probably did meet all my criteria really. I think it had news, it had fresh news. It was the right price. The float was a little high, and usually I thought it would have traded a bit thicker, but I think because the volume was quite low on it, it was moving, it was moving 60 cents in a candle backwards and forwards. So yeah, light volume on this one, and didn't take a trade on that. It just seemed a bit too volatile and a bit too high risk to take the trade on this. And by this time here, the MACD's closed over, and I wasn't interested in it taking a trade now. So the next stock was, actually, if I go back to VVPR, so I didn't take any trades on it through this section here. Then it pulled back, dropped about 30 cents, and gradually grinded its way back up, and broke VWAP. But the problem with this stock now is that every time it put in a move, it would jackknife down, and it had all these moves here where it pushes, good push, and then it would, give back most of the move in the next candle. And it did that here, it did that here, and, kind of pulled back a bit there as well. So it was a bit risky for me to get in on this stock. I just didn't want to risk getting caught in a flush back down, and if I got in here at the break of the VWAP and be holding for a push up, if I didn't get out here, then I possibly could have been stuck in it down here, thinking, oh, is this going to go further, and having a massive loss on it. So, well, not massive, but a decent loss on it, and that would have frustrated me. So coming into the open, it just sold off as well. It did push up to the high, but nearly to the high, pushed up to $5 at the open, but you can just see that once it failed, it just pretty much dumped all the way back down to where it came from, basically. So no trades on VVPR for me. And then I did look at DRMA as well. With DRMA, put in a move here in pre-market around 7:30, pushed up to 269, not a big move, and then sort of pulled back. I didn't take any of these dip trades here. By that time it was sort of over the move here, and it sort of pulled back and given most of that move back. So I didn't like this action either. It became quite thickly traded on DRMA, and it just seemed to have a lot of sellers. Like here it just flat topped at, you know, around $2, $2.02, you know, for what's that, you know, a good 10 minutes. Finally broke through it, but it just didn't go very far. It went up 20 cents, 30 cents, which probably would have been okay, but yeah. No, I just left that one. It's too thickly traded for me. And then I went into the open, and I did watch VVPR at the open, but I didn't add a trade to that, didn't trade that obviously. But I did look at TNON, and this was the last stock I looked at actually taking a trade on. And I saw it as it sort of had broken through VWAP and pulled back here. And this is probably one of the better entries here at the first pullback after VWAP. And I looked at that around 291 for the push up to 3, over 3. And that would have been you know, a nice easy base hit trade. And then here when it pulled back down to about 390, that was the other entry level that I thought about taking as well. And then it did push up to 326, 328. I think there was a pre-market high of 330. That was made early on, and yeah, it sort of came up to that, but didn't quite get to test that level completely. But it didn't take that. By this time, it was coming to the end of my session around 10 o'clock, and I just thought, I'm not going to push it now. You know, if I pushed it now and took a loss, I'd probably get frustrated, and I'd still be trading it, you know, an hour later trying to recover the loss and spiraling into another red day. And the last stock I saw was MLGO. MLGO has been up a few times, or a couple of times recently, I think. So this at open went from around $11, $10.93.98, or $10.90, up to a high of $20.74. I saw it when it was coming up to about 14. It made a high of 14.74, and in this area here, I was looking at an entry around $14. Actually, was it? Yeah, it was pulling up here around $14. So glad I didn't take that entry, because it came back down, you know, 50 cents, and it did rally and push back through that level. But the problem with this stock was it was too expensive for me, and because of wider spreads and the way it was moving, it was a very high risk stock for me to trade. So I looked at it and then decided not to take any trades on this either. And I went back to look at TNON, and I didn't see any of this move in the end. It wasn't until I was closing my computer down, I saw it on the scanner, it was around $18, and I was like, whoa, that made a big move. But very difficult stock to manage risk on. So I walked away without taking a trade today, and I think that was the right decision. If I'd taken a trade later on in the session on TNON or MLGO, then, you know, lost and gone red and ended the day red, I would have been really frustrated with myself for doing that. And, my confidence would have taken a knock again. So by not taking those trades, by staying disciplined, avoiding unnecessary risk, I actually came away today feeling more confident in my decision and about myself. So yeah, it was the right decision today. Not every day is going to bring the perfect trade, and today's proof of that. But staying disciplined and keeping my focus on my strategy and my A quality setups, really boosted my confidence today. So, would you have taken any of those trades that I passed on? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you're enjoying these daily recaps. I'll see you again tomorrow. Hei au popo.